everyone, welcome to CEC Online Lectures. I am Dr. Amna. I teach political science at Shyama Prasad Mukherjee College for Women, University of Delhi. Dear learners, the lecture that we will be understanding today is a very significant one. Its topic is titled as Analyzing the Post-Globalization Age. This lecture will be of great use for the learners from the discipline of political science, international relations, international business, practitioners from various fields who have a very important stake in understanding the contemporary global reality. So welcome everyone to CEC online lecture, and as we begin the studies on the topic of analyzing post-globalization age, let me earmark that we will be taking our learning forward in a structured format. We will have a look at key historical events, the historical timeline that made the process of globalization have a worldwide impact. Followed by that, we will have a look at various types of globalization in order to understand what globalization presented for the world scenario in terms of its impacts presented for various aspects of life, various sectors of human aspects. Then we will understand and underline the key debates that are going on in the contemporary scenario, from practitioners to policy makers coming together, putting forward a perspective, putting forward their views in terms of how and where does the world polity go forward in future with the aspect of globalization. Now we all know that history always has some very important messages. Quite often the messages that are deeply there in the terrain of history are also linked. When we talk about globalization to the very air times of 1870s, when telegraph was invented, to the time of the 19th century when rail system was there, first cars were invented, or to the fact that how in 1980s the broadband was put forward, or to the fact that how today when we are looking at various historical aspects, there are today new histories being created in the innovative realm of things connecting us together, from robots to electronic cars to upgraded and up to scale various infrastructural projects, solar projects, batteries, amongst others. Now let's understand that the very idea of integration and exchange that globalization puts forward, the aspect of connectivity, the aspect of quest towards better avenues or innovations have always existed in human civilization. History of human civilization is filled with many examples. To name a few, we all witnessed the great historical Silk Route, which led to movement of goods from one part of the country to another part of another country. The world witnessed the Spice Route, wherein civilizations flourished. After that, world witnessed the age of discoveries, where innovations in science and technology, though in very initial phase, led to new aspects for human beings and human lives to cater to. After that, we are saying that one world witnesses the great kind of innovations that are there at the industries, and thereby this makes trade as a engine of growth. Countries get together in 19th century to explore trade routes. This very debate of exploration of trade routes becomes a hotly contested topic of imperialism for world politics. So therefore, when we are trying to understand the first aspect, namely the industrial revolution aspect, and because the idea of growth, the idea of prosperity, or perhaps movement from one to the other wherein there is betterment, primarily ushered in by changes in methods, processes of production and distribution, ushered in by the use of various machines. Industrial revolution also over the globe took place in various phases, where in the first phase the world witnessed that the idea of industrial revolution was limited to, say, textiles, industrial goods. In later part, the industrial revolution expanded, and thereby the world's focus was drawn towards how it is important to have up to great technologies, how it is important to have large scale production in factories, how it is important for any nation to secure its industrial base in order to have a global presence. The third phase of industrial revolution, wherein the world saw important economies like the United States taking forward the revolution in the sense of global supply chain, in the sense of large scale production. So therefore, once again, trade linked to heavy, large scale, mass upgraded industrial production became the yardstick of growth for the world. Now, this is being seen by the fourth phase of industrial revolution, wherein we are seeing that the focus is shifting towards digital goods and services. So therefore, we see that the world, in the sense of developments in various methods and mechanisms that cater to the industry, have witnessed changes. Somewhere this has to be understood with the various phases that were there in the process of globalization to go forward. We all saw that once again globalization 1.0 was limited in scale. It was mainly about trade in goods. It was mainly about interchange and exchange via whatever limited mechanisms of trade were available. Globalization 2.0, which was again presenting new aspects when the world was in itself witnessing new churnings, new crises, and the very idea of trade, linkages, interchange, exchange was offering new dimensions for the world to explore. Globalization 3.0, with which we all are familiar, presented to us an idea of a world where there was compression of space and time, and this has brought towards a new phase, that is globalization 4.0, with digitalization, new aspects of technology, communication, information taking forward the battle. Now, this presents to us another important dimension, that is how globalization, in terms of its various dimensions, has presented to us various typologies of globalization. And for us, it is important to understand these typologies to better understand that how and why it is very much needed for all the stakeholders who think that today world is a common place for deliberation, and thereby every person must come together to understand and think about solutions that lie ahead. Globalization in its technological dimensions presented to us a world of robotics, presented to us a world of green solutions, presented to us a world of connectivity. Globalization in the segment of its economics presented to us the idea of interconnected global markets. Globalization in the realm of finance presented to us new kind of instruments, new kind of products to trade with, and not only increase the interlinkages between states, but at the same time also lead to better revenues for states and parties in trading. Globalization in the segment of its demographics, in the sense of population, made us avenues like youth bulge, graying population, aging populations for us to comprehend, because after all, it is the human resources that take forward the aspects of economic processes forward for any state. Then when we understand globalization in its environmental aspects, globalization was presented to us in the form of climate change, rise of new forms of institutionalized cooperation via norms, regimes, amongst others. When we look at globalization from the political aspect, we find that there was rise of new forms of cooperation. More and more states got increased interest in global affairs. However, at the same time, alongside increase in mechanisms of intergovernmental issues, cooperations, summits, and platforms of global diplomacy, there were also questions that were put forward on the sovereignty and territoriality of the particular state. Then similarly, when we see globalization in the form of cultural avenues, at one point of time it is and it is still presenting avenues for integration in terms of a common language, common codes, global norms, cosmopolitanism, amongst others. And at the same time, this is also being critiqued in terms of silence of the indigenous grassroots values, ignorance of the home issues, vice, and etc. Now, when we look at these churnings that are going, we now analyze some of the key issues that are there. A very important aspect that is there in the book The Leveler. Now we understand that why this book and its author puts forward the idea that globalization is over, because it says that there was absence of a global architecture to regulate globalization. Further, one cannot ignore that how the gains of globalization were lopsided. Another perspective that is there in terms of understanding that what lies for the future of globalization is put forward in this very important aspect given, and we understand this, that is, it says that how the United States President Donald Trump at the United Nations General Assembly quoted a very important thing, that the future belongs to the patriots and not to the globalists. This also shows us that how not only there are transitions that are taking place in the world polity, but for the learners it is important to understand, as per the views and interpretation of the author here, that it is not only about looking at the statement in its power value, but also understanding the deep meanings. That is it about that the world is moving from unipolar globalization to multipolar globalization? The third perspective that we will understand based on popular search from various web resources is the argument that is put forward by Charles Beams. This is from the Forbes.com. Now, the argument here is that there is a need for self-reliance. There's a need for self-reliance to cure the ills of globalization. Now, it is very important for, if we take this argument on its face value, that how it is important for nations and for states to factor in the aspects that there is a need to be self-sufficient. There is a need to really be equipped on their own, because the fact that gains as well as losses, benefits as well as disadvantages have had a joint common stake. Now, at the same time, the author also makes a very important aspect of the space. Now, that's very important, so I will leave you with the resources, online resources, where you can read further and, of course, enhance this understanding of what lies ahead for globalization. Another important perspective that we read from the very important Voices of the Chinese Premier, and this is from the World Economic Forum. Now, it talks about that one has to go forward with the various dynamics of globalization, which requires that one must think for equal rights. One must think about ways and mechanisms to engage with parity in the global processes. Now, another important view is once again put forward from various resources, studies that we have done from World Economic Forum, and we quote here that the world is having various kinds of problems. One of the problems, for example, if we go by the views of the author here, that today world is witnessing problems like that of medical debts, problems that of crop failure, and all of it somewhere have a joint causation. So therefore, what is essential here is that we need a right mix of incentives as well as regulations to cater to the uneasy terrain that is there. With one hand, there is a plea that one must roll back globalization, wherein there, on the other hand, there is a plea that one must reform globalization. Another important view that it is there for study at hand here is that is, and we quote the author once again from the World Economic Forum archives, that this entire choice between technology and jobs, that this choice between openness versus protectionism is somewhere it's a false dichotomy. And what is needed here is one has to think about various avenues of cooperation. There are several avenues of cooperation. What is needed here is that besides just deepening them, one has to renew the commitment to all of them. And this is also very important because one cannot ignore that even in the present phase of world history, in the contemporary time of global realities, we all have a shared future. Closing down borders cannot do away with the fact that we have been made to be accustomed to live in a world where there was blurring down of all borders, or thereby what we say space time compression. So therefore, dear learners, when we are understanding the dynamics, the challenges, the opportunities, and the larger issues that are there in understanding, analyzing post-globalization age, it is important to reflect on first negation of international treaties. That is, think about examples where international agreements, which are symbols of cooperation, have they been negated? What are the costs? What are the benefits that have been there for to the parties who have negated and to the parties who are already there in the existence? When we are understanding the future of globalization, one has to see the debate of idea of looking inwards with respect to protectionism. That is, can we think about economic integration, or should we have a model that is based on protectionism. Now, every case, every problem is unique. It has its own dynamics in terms of demand, supply, in terms of various contextual forces. So, therefore, for all the policymakers, for academia, for media, while looking at the post-globalization age, the churning between what lies in terms of the costs and benefits with about global openness or with respect to protectionism. Then there's a big question of populist demands with respect to democracy issue. That is, has democracy somewhere not been able to do justice to issues of common people? And this is why world over populism is being seen as the answer by millions of people across the globe to answer out, to put forward their perspectives for their respective polities. So all these issues are very crucial because they are no more about domestic aspects, but they also have a bearing on the language, the tenor, the intricacies that really go in molding global policies for their respective state and national governments. And then it's very important to see that the dynamics of inside versus outside, and above all the fact is that today countries are witnessing that power's dimension has changed. It is no longer about military. Power is multidimensional in terms of technology, gender, ecology. Security is no more about domination or freedom from violence. It's about health security, food security, personal security, community security, economic security, amongst others. And in all these aspects, the inputs that go in for any state government, national government to make their policies also undergoes change, and thereby with this change, once again they are interlinked. With this change, they are also facing a future where joint thinking must be there in order to reform the existing structure, in order to get better benefits from new opportunities coming forward, in order to tap better revenue and avenues from new rising horizons. So therefore, when we conclude that analyzing post globalization age, it opens up an array of questions, but at the same time these questions are our landmark. These questions, these issues are our guidepost to get together, to think, to nurture things better and work out a better, great future for human civilization, which offers more scope for analysis, for deliberation, for scholars, practitioners, academia, media, policymakers alike. Thank you once again, listeners, for being a part of the lecture. We hope you all gained significant insights into the topic of analyzing post-globalization age. Thank you.